Good morning. Welcome to the 31st Call Action Coalition Annual Breakfast. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you. I'd like to make a few acknowledgments. I'd like the people from the Farmington schools please stand up and be acknowledged. People from the city of Farmington, will you please stand and be acknowledged? People from the city of Farmington Hills. And the people from the Call Action Coalition and the Children's Youth and Families Commission. And if you have not stood up, please stand up so you can be acknowledged for coming. I'd like to invite up Reverend Nick Bonsky to give us our opening prayer.
Eternal Creator of us all, we come before you as a community. We come before you as a community looking to be advocates of peace, justice, and mercy in this world, and we give you thanks for that opportunity. We ask that you bless these conversations and bless each and every one of us as we look to be love and justice in this world. We pray all this in your holy and loving name because you hear us. Amen.
Thank you, Nick. I'd like to invite up Fire Chief John Unruh to lead us in the pledge.
Good morning, everyone. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, John. And I'd like to invite up Jackie Jones from the 47th District Court to talk about the Sobriety Court.
Good morning. My name is Jackie Jones, and I am the Sobriety Court Coordinator and Director of the Probation Department at the 47th District Court. The Sobriety Court program is run by Judge Parker and has been in existence since 2005. She sentenced her first case back on August 15th of that year. The program is an intensive program. In order to qualify for the program, a person must live in Farmington or Farmington Hills. From there, they have to either be a repeat offender, have a certain blood alcohol content level, or score a certain number on an assessment tool that we use. If one of those factors is met, they then meet with the probation officer to be screened and assessed for their offense. It will be determined at that time if they're truly a good fit for the program. Participants in the program are deemed to be alcohol dependent. The program consists of 4 phases in the last 24 months. The first phase, being the most intensive, is in phase 1, a person is testing for alcohol twice a day, randomly drug tested, seeing their probation officer bi-weekly, meeting with their therapist in individual and group therapy on a weekly basis. They're required to attend 12-step meetings on any day they're not doing something for the program, and they are to seek and maintain a 12-step sponsor. They have to attend the Phoenix group and appear in a court bi-weekly before the judge. In the following 3 phases, the participants comply with the orders that I just mentioned, but things become a little reduced from there. In phase 2, they may become eligible for a sobriety court restricted license, in which they'll have an interlock device placed on their vehicle, and that device will have a GPS tracking device on it as well as a face recognition. They'll attend the driver intervention program, which is a program that is not only therapeutic, but helps a person understand what they will need to get their license fully restored when the time comes. In phase 3, with the help of their therapist and probation officer, they begin to explore career and educational goals, and they also begin to write the relapse prevention plan. By phase 4, we're hoping that they're moving on embracing their sobriety and working a solid plan to keep themselves on the road to recovery. If things go as planned, a participant will be stepped down in that phase into a non-reporting probation status, and they will not see the judge again until graduation. Throughout the entire program, there are incentives for doing well, for moving to a new phase, such as words of encouragement, an applause. They're given an optimist creed along the way, a coin that states where treatment and justice meets. There's a book that's called the 24-Hour Book, which is a 12-step book, and then they receive a 3 3-month gym membership that also contains a personal training session. There are also sanctions when a person fails to comply, which could include writing an essay, doing work program, attending additional therapy or education classes, increased testing, having to mail the probation officer on a daily basis, and ultimately it could result in incarceration. The program has a team that includes not only the judge and staff from the probation department, but also includes defense attorneys, a therapist, and at times an officer from our local police station. Our stations are extremely supportive of our program. Each of our our agencies conduct home visits for us, and they follow up their visit with a report back to our department. The visits are unscheduled, so therefore they're a surprise to the participant when an officer appears at their home. One time we had an officer conduct a home visit, and it just happened to be one of the participants' birthdays. So she was really focused on her birthday, so when the officer showed up at the door, she'd actually thought someone had hired her as a stripper. So needless to say, she was a little disappointed. At the last, a lot of time and effort goes into the program, and they have the support of both Judge Brady and Dave Walsh, our court administrator, as well as the police stations, our city managers, and our council. As of today, we've had 151 people enter the program, including 18 active participants. 102 have successfully completed the program, giving the success rate of a 77%. The participants work really hard, and there's a lot that's expected of them. Upon completion of their program, their lives are so much fuller in so many ways. Their families at times are restored. One only has to attend a sobriety court graduation to see how a person has transformed their life. It's pretty awesome to see the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Now I'd like to invite up Jim Edson. Jim is the Farmington Fire Department EMS coordinator. So welcome, Jim.
Good morning. On behalf of Chief Unruh, I want to thank you once again for the opportunity for the fire department to come and participate in this event. Historically, especially in recent years, we've spoken to the opioid epidemic from the Farmington Hills perspective. And this year I actually want to kind of change gears and present some county-wide statistics to you and not just confine our insight to this immediate community. I have just 6 slides in this PowerPoint, and I'm certainly willing to share it with anyone who would like a copy of it. These are statistics directly from the Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office, Dr. Dragovich and his staff. The first thing that we'll speak to are these are deaths attributed to either drug abuse or drug intoxication. And really the difference is, was it a chronic problem or really more of an acute issue? From 2015 to 2018, and then January through September of this year, it's important to note that intentional overdoses are excluded from this data. So as you can see, in 2015, there were 226 deaths attributed to drug abuse or intoxication. In 2016, that climbed to 277. It peaked in 2017 with 311. And then we started seeing, fortunately, a decline in 2018 down to 222, and 2019 down to 167. Now, of the 222 cases in 2018, 161, or approximately 73% involved fentanyl. As a matter of fact, the administrator, Casimir Majorca, at the Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office, has indicated that they've seen a sharp decline in actual heroin. They're actually seeing very little of it, and it's predominantly synthetic opioids that are the problem, as I'm sure Craig Summers will speak to later on. And amongst those synthetic opioids, I mean, there are numerous variations out there, but acetylfentanyl is really the most prominent, representing 24% of those cases. A couple of years ago, particularly in Macomb County, there was really a striking increase in deaths with the presence of cocaine, and we're seeing a little bit less of that, but it still continues to be a problem. And then 56 cases with the presence of marijuana in 2018, and then Interestingly, as we've been saturating the community with Narcan, whether it be through emergency responders such as fire departments and law enforcement agencies, but also making it available to members of the public, that's translating to the Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office finding more naloxone in these victims. But going back to that for a moment, also given the potency of these synthetic opioids that we're dealing with, we're still giving more doses to an individual than we may have in the past. And they're difficult to, more difficult to reverse or to resuscitate. Here are the 2019 statistics, January through September. So fentanyl still continues to be a problem at 65%. The synthetics like acetyl fentanyl is still about the same at 26%. And just to kind of give you a little comparison here, so the fentanyl is actually down 7.5% from 2018 to now. The acetyl fentanyl is up 2%. The cocaine is down 5%. Marijuana has remained the same. And the presence of naloxone has gone down about 1%. So what you have here are comparisons 2018 to 2019 year to date as it relates to the months. And really, there's a few things that jump out here. I know it's kind of difficult for some of you to see, but in May 2018, there were 14 deaths associated with drug abuse or intoxication. And in the same month in 2019, there were 32. So, more than double. And, again, Craig might be able to speak to, obviously HIDA, working with local law enforcement, gets an indication of when, particular drugs are hitting the street and, in maybe in increased volume. And obviously that can carry over into the medical examiner's office too when they're seeing more and more overdoses. On that note, I will say that really the most reliable indications of the presence of certain drugs, especially these synthetics which are constantly developing and evolving, are law enforcement seizures and statistics from the medical examiner's office such as this. It's important for people to know that when first of all, if it's a suspected suspected death due to drug abuse or drug intoxication, here, at least in Oakland County, that will trigger an automatic autopsy. So obviously, things can be figured out in cases like that. But if the individual actually goes to the hospital and survives, the testing that the emergency departments routinely do will simply identify that it was an opioid, and will not. It requires more involved, more advanced screening to determine specifically what opioid it was, whether or not it was a synthetic. So the emergency departments are actually not a good indicator of what's out there on the street. It's really what law enforcement is seizing that ultimately gets tested, and again from the Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office. And then here we have a makeup of the genders and the ethnicity. So there were two so far. This is year to date, or actually to August. In 2019, 2 Hispanic males with the average age being 24. That's kind of hard for me to read. 12 black females with the average age being 43. 17 black males with the average age being 45. 50 white females with the average age being 42. 69 white males with the average age of 40. 62 females, 88 males. And I spoke with the medical examiner's office as recently as yesterday, and they said these statistics go through August of this year, but they've indicated that they've had a really concerning increase in the number of female overdoses in the last couple months or so, and it's really causing them great concern. And then 88 males. And then Craig, I'm sorry if this was included within your slide, but it does come from Craig's office. And it's the last slide we have here, and it just demonstrates how little fentanyl it takes to result in a deadly overdose, as compared to a penny that you see there on the top left. And then when we talk about the potency of these different drugs that we're dealing with, everyone here I think has a sense of how strong morphine is, and using that as the foundation or the reference point Heroin is 2 times stronger than morphine. Fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine. And then carfentanil, which is really intended to be an animal tranquilizer more than anything else, is 10,000 times more powerful than morphine. Just to leave you with a little bit of good news, as recently as a couple of years ago, you could say that with the opioid crisis, that Massachusetts was really ground zero within the eastern United States, and actually our neighbors to the south, Ohio, might have been considered to be ground zero for the Midwest. And they had a tremendous carfentanil problem as recently as a couple of years ago. I'm happy to report that the Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office says that they haven't seen any carfentanil here in Oakland County in the past 2 years. So thank you very much for your time, and again, we'll make this available to whoever might like it.
Thank you, Jim. And now I'd like to invite up Frank Demers. Frank is the Public Safety Director for the City of Farmington.
Good morning, everybody. I want to just gloss over a few points, and they kind of are in line with some of the things Jim just talked about, and certainly in line with the mission of the Call to Action Coalition, who first I want to thank for hosting this breakfast today for a 31st annual event. This is important for us all to, renew our sincerity and our seriousness about our efforts in trying to devote resources to addiction and the drug problems, the drug issues we have, not only in Farmington Hills, but throughout the county and state. So Jim and to the crew, thank you, for Mitch and the crew, thank you for having us today. I want to start out by an incident we just had a couple weeks ago. If you look at our numbers so far through October in 2019, you'll find that our drug numbers, our drug arrest numbers are actually way down. I'm sure that Mr. Summers will speak about this a little bit, but we can actually thank the legalization of marijuana for reducing our narcotics crimes. In Farmington alone, they're down 94%. And that's not because we're devoting any less efforts towards our narcotics enforcement, but that is because the decriminalization of marijuana has had a significant impact in reducing our Part A or serious crimes. So that's pretty significant when we're saying, boy, we had to rely on the legalization of marijuana to positively impact our crime numbers. That sounds kind of odd, doesn't it? But nonetheless, that's the situation we're in right now. Farmington Hills, we're so fortunate in enjoying the safe communities that we live in. I can speak for Farmington, of course, and that our home invasions continue to reach record lows. Robberies as well. I just mentioned possession of marijuana and marijuana-related drugs arrests are way down. We are seeing a bit of not a spike, but a bit of an increase in heroin possession as compared to years past, and we're holding steady on our naloxone administration to those who have overdosed. But the story that I want to mention, naloxone could not save. This was a couple weeks ago, a 40-year-old male with a long history of alcohol abuse. A long history of arrests associated with alcohol-related crimes, found himself once again under the purview of the court, and a part of his bond conditions was that he had to wear a tether, and it was an alcohol monitoring tether to ensure that he was not consuming alcohol while on probation. He was such an addict and having such trouble and not turning to anyone or having anybody to turn to that he turned to huffing in order to sustain that high. And one night his father went into his room after his son didn't wake up in the morning, and he found his son dead in his bed, surrounded by empty cans of dust-off. So he actually died. His body actually gave up on him essentially as a result of huffing. Which is something that we don't see very often, and it's kind of one of those drugs you hear about. You don't hear about huffing as much as you do vaping and anything like that. But this is alive and well, and it's something that it's an indication of the extreme measures that these addicts are turning to in order to get that high. And unfortunately, the results of this were tragic, and this young man passed away. So, you know, I think we're going to hear a little bit more from Mr. Summers today, but I can't help but think about the lessons from Colorado. You know, we were kind of given a heads up, and I'm sure a few of you have heard the speech before about the Rocky Mountain HIDA report on through the legalization of marijuana, what types of things they started to see that were degrading their community. An increase in fatality and traffic crashes, and drivers having intoxicating levels of marijuana in their body. We're starting to see that increase in drugged driving arrests. We're not seeing in our community, but I just read an article recently where we're starting to see increases in calls to local poison control. These are the exact things that we heard happen in Colorado, starting to make their way into Michigan as a result of our new legislation. So this is it. This is where we're at, and we cannot reduce our efforts at all in dealing with it. We just have to find new ways of dealing with it. And fortunately, with our community of resources, we have those ways, and the Call to Action Coalition is certainly one of them. So I want to turn my focus today to our honoree today, who could not be here, and I will be accepting his award on his behalf. Detective James Wren has been with our department for about 8 years, and in 2015, the department assigned Detective Wren as a task force officer with the Oakland County Narcotics Enforcement Team. This marked the first time in decades that the department participated in a multi-jurisdictional drug enforcement team. We recognize the need for additional enforcement through the opioid epidemic and other dynamics of what was going on with illicit narcotics in the community. And the goal of NET is to investigate drug trafficking within Oakland County with the purpose of detecting and apprehending persons who violate narcotics laws within Oakland County. Representing the city of Farmington as a NET participating agency, Detective Wren was part of a team that executed numerous high-risk search warrants, which led to the discovery and confiscation of large amounts of illicit narcotics in Oakland County, and he identified and arrested individuals involved in the sale and distribution of narcotics. As a part of his assignment, Detective Wren was responsible for following up on narcotics-related arrests and investigations originating within the city of Farmington. And in August 2015, just 1 month into his assignment, he investigated a report of increased activity consistent with drug sales at a Farmington residence. Neighbors also filed numerous complaints about ongoing problems with excessive noise and nuisance-related problems at this home. So for several weeks, new to his assignment, Detective Wren and his partners from NET conducted surveillance and deployed other investigative techniques to develop evidence of criminal activity at the home. As a result of his investigation, a search warrant was executed at the home where officers recovered narcotics and a stolen firearm. The occupants of the rental home were subsequently evicted, and neighbors expressed their sincere appreciation for the efforts of NET and of the Public Safety Department for the handling of the case. In May of 2018, Detective Wren was awarded a meritorious service citation from Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard in recognition of his significant contributions to a multi-agency investigation involving the sale and distribution of illicit narcotics throughout southeast Michigan, which led to the dismantling of an organized criminal organization. Detective Wren performed admirably and completed his assignment with NET on December of 2018, and he has now been laterally promoted to the position of fire marshal. So today he's learning how to be a fire inspector out on the west side of the state in a training. But he remains committed to passing on his vast knowledge of drug investigations to his fellow officers to improve their knowledge and skill in detecting and preventing illicit drug trade in the city of Farmington. So in recognition of his tremendous work during his assignment as a NET task force officer, he is recognized as the Farmington Hills Call to Action Coalition Officer of the Year for 2019. So I will be accepting this award on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And now I'd like to invite up Chief Chuck Nevis. He is the Farmington Hills Chief of Police. So,
Good morning, everyone. The annual breakfast is 31 years old, as you heard, but it was probably about 35 years ago that a few mothers gathered in a living room in Farmington Hills to talk about taking action against underage drinking, and Farmington Families in Action was born. Our founder, Betty Nicolai, ran the ship for many years, and Farmington Families in Action turned into the community coalition that we know it as today. Sadly, Betty passed away on July 28th this past summer, and Betty and her organization was responsible for many, many things. Our open house party ordinance, and working in conjunction with law enforcement. USA Today newspaper, when it was born, had an article that we were the first community in Michigan to have the Open House Party Act. Betty and her group, Farmington Families in Action, took that further to work with City Council on a drug paraphernalia ordinance, hotel ordinance. Betty worked tirelessly for Red Ribbon campaigns and Sober October, the BABES program in the schools, and educational materials that were distributed widely throughout the community before we got all our information on social media. Times have changed since Betty passed away. Betty and those original moms didn't hear the terms carfentanil, synthetic marijuana, earwax marijuana, medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, or naloxone. Every year brings new topics for me to talk to you about every year. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about some new laws of vaping, CBD oils, opioid update, local impact of recreational marijuana, and just a few miscellaneous things. All the topics, it was hard for me to decide what to talk about because so much happened in September that law enforcement was trying to keep track of. September 27th, I received an update from the Michigan Chiefs Association about the Youthful Tobacco Act in Michigan was amended, and it regulates for people less than 18 for alternate tobacco products and vaping products. Minors can't purchase or possess or buy or use false ID or face civil infractions for buying certain e-cigarettes and liquid nicotine containers. And there's new rules for sellers that law enforcement is trying to figure out regarding vending machines and purchasing and advertising and counters and where things can be located. As usual, Farmington and Farmington Hills and our schools are way ahead. Last year, both cities passed vaping ordinances, and our schools have rules prohibiting vaping and e-cigarettes in the schools. Also, about 4 or 5 years ago, Councilman Lerner worked with law enforcement, both agencies, and we used some forfeiture funds sometimes to pay for Drugs 101 in our schools. This past year, very timely it was, that we've amended that program a little bit, and Councilman Lerner working with the schools, we just had multiple presentations at North Farmington and Farmington High School for all the students about vaping. And Vaping 101, Cheryl Phillips from St. Joe's is here with us this morning, and thank you for helping us with that, about how timely it is that we are doing those presentations. Because again, in September 18th, Michigan Department of Health and Human Resources and Governor Whitmer signed orders to ban flavored e-cigarettes and flavored vaping products. And Michigan was the first state to do that, followed by New York and Rhode Island, and other states are talking about it. As we figure out new laws, even the medical marijuana, we're still figuring it out. Some of the vaping things are still being figured out. As a matter of fact, it was just 4 days ago there was a clarification that came to the Michigan Chiefs Association from the Michigan Department of Health, clarifying that the new rules and for minors do not prohibit the sale of flavored vaping products that do not contain nicotine. So a lot of things are still being figured out. One of the reasons this is so important is regarding e-cigarettes. High school use of e-cigarettes for high school students is up 78%. In middle schools, it's up 48%. And our Vaping 101, I understand there's some discussions, by the way, about maybe bringing that program into our middle schools. A communication that came across my desk from our governor via the Michigan Chiefs here recently talked about some of the new rules. And the governor's letter mentions that the total number of children who are currently using e-cigarettes rose last year to 3.6 million. And one of the things most significant about this is that's a 1.5 million increase from the previous year. So that was the reason for the alarm bills. Something about the e-cigarettes that the communication contained. I'm not going to list all the chemicals, but it talks about 6 toxic chemicals sometime that are in these e-liquid cigarettes. and vaping products. And one of the chemicals is formaldehyde, so we're not putting good things into our bodies. And the thing about e-cigarettes can rewire the brain to crave more, and the United States Surgeon General has officially declared e-cigarettes use among the youth in the United States at epidemic levels. Just this past weekend, you've probably heard, the media has been following very closely the deaths across the country. As of this past weekend, there was 12 recent vaping pen deaths across the country, and 800 people became very ill. As folks are looking into what happened with all that, we're finding that 18 of these cartridges were examined, and all of them had THC, the active ingredient for marijuana. 13 of these incidents investigated had vitamin E, which can damage the lungs. And all of the products had a chemical called myoclopbutanol, which, when burned, becomes hydrogen cyanide, which is poison. So, to no surprise. Vaping pens, even without THC, can cause a variety of illnesses. Popcorn lung, bronchiolitis, wet lung, pneumonitis. No one knows the long-term effects of all these. Interesting development with the most popular vaping device called Juul. You may have seen it. We've been the last few years, if you read the Detroit, the Free Press, the hard copy editions, you'll see a full-page ad about e-cigarettes. As a result of all the deaths and some recent developments, Juul has made a lot of changes. They have stopped all their advertising in the United States. They have fired their CEO. They have agreed to go along with President Trump's proposal that's being discussed about banning e-cigarette flavors. And Juul has on their website, they've acknowledged that one Juul cartridge is equivalent to the amount of nicotine in the pack of cigarettes, about 200 puffs. And I might mention they're not responsible for the mysterious deaths that are being investigated, but thought you'd find that interesting. I'm going to shift gears to CBD oil, short for cannabidiol. It's a form of hemp. It does not contain THC. It's now legal. You see it everywhere in candy, beverages, and beauty products. That's not what I'm really here to talk about this morning. I'm mentioning about the thought, have you given it a thought, what's in your CBD vaping oil? Again, September data was overwhelming in regards to alcohol and drugs and vaping. The American press reported that 30 vaping oils were tested, and 10 contained synthetic marijuana, and others had no CBD oil at all. Government labs tested 350 samples, 128 had synthetic marijuana, and one sample in Mississippi was actually found with fentanyl. Shifting gears to opioids, what's new there? Over 2,000 deaths are still taking place in Michigan. Farmington Hills last year, in our annual report for the administration of Narcan, the police department administered 20 times, the fire department 90 times, and we had 4 deaths recorded. And again, locally in September, we just saw that we had 2 physicians from Farmington Hills were sentenced for opioid pushing, meaning overprescribing, one doctor receiving 4 years, one doctor receiving 19 years in prison. Also in September, additional news from the state of Michigan, Michigan Department of Health and Human Resources, they announced giving away 55,000 free Narcan kits. I can remember it was maybe 5-6 years ago, I sat at executive staff meeting with my staff and we said, should we be carrying Narcan? The state, so how it's evolved. 50,000 of those free kits have been given to over 1,000 registered pharmacies in the state of Michigan, and no prescription is necessary to obtain those. A few quick comments shifting over to the impact of recreational marijuana. A lot of what was predicted has come true, a lot we don't know yet. Our arrests in Farmington Hills for marijuana are down. For 2018, we arrested 189 people for marijuana. We're down to 56 this year. In regards to drug paraphernalia, last year we had 87 arrests, down to 25. Seizures are down, forfeitures are down, distributor arrests and cases are going to be down. Sniffs and smells for law enforcement and dogs are no longer acceptable without more for probable cause for searches. Council and law enforcement in our city and many others are wrestling with what do we do about the odor of marijuana that people are complaining about now, and the mold, and people, neighbors in condominiums that are reporting the obnoxious odors and smells. Still monitoring what to do with some of the marijuana licensing. Drug driving is up in Michigan, 225 Michigan fatalities, and more drivers in Michigan since recreational marijuana are testing positive for marijuana, about 200 per year. There's been a pilot program the state police have expanded. It went from 5 counties also in September, you may have just heard about now. It's expanding to some local law enforcement agencies as well, experimenting with a swab for drivers stopped for suspected drug driving. They're still working on that program. In regards to operating while impaired data in Farmington Hills in the last 20 months, we've had 255 operating while impaired arrests. And those numbers are really down. Many years ago, I would have said it was 400 to 500. For drug driving in the last 20 months in Farmington Hills, we've had 31 arrests. And a very interesting statistic that I had to double check was minors in possession. We've had 13 minors ticketed in the last 20 months. If you flash back to the time Betty Nicolai and the moms were meeting in living rooms, we would have had, Craig Summers remembers those days as one of the old timers, we'd have 13 minor in possession tickets on a weekend in the summer. So a lot of good things. The number of parties that minors are having and alcohol consumption is certainly down. I'd be remiss without thanking Mitch Seeley and Betty Dworkin for their work, and Mitch carrying on the tradition of the call to action. Look forward to hearing from HIDA Director Craig Summers again this morning. And I'm going to move on now to a special award 2, and I'm going to ask to join me on the stage Sergeant Chad Double to receive a special award for our domestic high-risk response team. And also, when you say high-risk response team, it also means Lieutenant John Haupt and Colleen Monahan from Haven. If you'd just like to join us on the stand. There's other members of the team who are here and not here today, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about Chad, and the award is going to be received by Chad Double this morning. Our high-risk response team that we have was this first of a kind in Michigan. There's many members of the team. It also, I want to mention, includes Farmington Public Safety, Haven. It also includes our own here today. We're hosting the Breakfast Call to Action Coalition, My Family Services, Oakland University, Jewish Family Services, Farmington Public Schools is a partner, Beaumont Hospital, and our state and local prosecutors and our own 47th District Court. They meet monthly. They talk about the domestic violence cases we have. They do education. They do training. They do assessments on offenders, make sure no contact orders get into the system when offenders are released on bond. They do many, many things. And most recently, just a few things to bring to your attention. Councilmember Teresa Rich coordinated for us the Michigan Municipal League, just met at TCF, formerly known as Cobo Arena. This group did, on stage with me, did presentations. Sergeant Haupt did a big presentation for Haven, the high-risk response team recently. And also, very proud, I have a picture here, illustration. This group also, in July, the Michigan Bar Journal was recognized for domestic violence. Our high-risk response team was featured in a monthly magazine. So the accolades could go on and on. This group was formed back in 2012. Other communities have tried to follow suit. They've done presentations for the Exemplar Club, Macomb County Coordinating Council, Strangulation Conferences, Oakland Coordinating Council, Oakland University. They've taken our program and talked about it in Illinois, in Pennsylvania, in other states. They've won numerous awards. Domestic violence organizations, our mayor and council have issued them proclamations. And accepting the award today is Sergeant Chad Double. He's going to make a couple of comments to all of you. Chad is an 18-year veteran of the Farmington Hills Police Department. He's the current sergeant in investigations. He's our current police department liaison for the high-risk response team, being acknowledged and awarded today. He is a field training officer, firearms instructor, evidence technician. He teaches domestic violence and report writing at Oakland and Washtenaw Police Academies. For the state of Michigan, Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, he does domestic violence and sexual assault training. He's received 25 awards. In 2016, Sergeant Double received a domestic violence-related award from the Oakland County Coordinating Domestic Violence Council. He's also been the Officer of the Year on a couple of occasions. So without further ado, I'm going to, Mitch has it, okay, is going to award.
First of all, I'd like to thank the coalition for giving us this amazing award, and I accept this award as part of the team. The team is who really deserves this award for all the hard work they've done. I want to thank Chief Nebus and the police department for their continuous support of the team and allowing us to have it here in Farmington Hills for the last 7 years. I want to acknowledge and thank many organizations that continue to support this team, including the City of Farmington Hills, the council members, the courts, including probation, and the judges, Judge Brady and Judge Parker. I want to thank the coalition who continue to come to the meetings and support it. I want to thank Mitch and Judge Parker for their continuous support from the very beginning. I also want to thank the Farmington Public Safety and Director Demers for being part of the team, and the newest member, the Fire Department, for just joining the team. So we're really excited about that. I want to thank Haven, who we partnered with to start this, and have been very supportive and created this great team. But most of all, I want to thank the team and all the members of the team, especially Lieutenant Haupt, who 7 years ago co-founded this team and has made it what it is today, and Colleen Monahan for all the work that she does. A lot of people come to this meeting and they volunteer their time, and it just shows that people really have a passion and care about people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, and congratulations, Colleen, John, and Chad. Now I'd like to invite up Dan Rodriguez. Dan is the Assistant Chief with the Farmington Hills Police Department, and he will be talking about hope and not handcuffs. So, welcome, Dan.
Morning, everybody. I'll try to keep this brief. I've always learned that when people say that, they don't mean it, but I'm going to try. So with what we've already heard this morning, with some of the statistics that we have on drug overdoses, a few years ago, Chief Nebus had mentioned to me that he was looking at for different programs on how are we going to be involved with the community. We're always sort of looking for things that we can connect with that can help. One of the things that had come across our desk was an organization called Hope Not Handcuffs out of Macomb County. They were started by an organization called Families Against Narcotics. In fact, they were here, I think, a couple of years ago and did a presentation. So I did a little bit of research on the organization, and we were all invited to attend a few of their conferences. And I'll tell you, from my perspective in law enforcement, not to mention my background as a narcotics investigator in the past, I thought, boy, this is a little strange. I don't know if this will quite work. It made me feel a little bit uncomfortable just because of what we tend to do. So in June of 2018, after looking at this program, Chief Nebus and several others, including Director Demers from the city of Farmington, decided to join Hope Not Handcuffs and 12 other Oakland County Police Departments to participate. I'm proud to say that since then, we're up to 20 Oakland County Police Departments that are now in this program. It was founded in 2007, and basically what it does is it works with other organizations in the community to help those that are addicted to substances, whether it's opioids, prescription pills, or alcohol. And this is how it works. So our police department's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever, 365 days a year. And a person who's addicted, who needs help, can come to our police station and they can ask for help. This is where it gets a little bit weird, because I thought, who wants to come to a police station who has an addiction problem? Although we deal with a lot of people who are struggling with addiction, I realized that this just didn't fit right. It doesn't seem right. Like, people wouldn't be attracted to us. Most of the time, people who are in the drug world tend to shy away from law enforcement for various reasons. But what I found out, and several of the people involved with Hope Not Handcuffs are parents of those addicted, and several others are actually addicts who are living through addiction and sobriety. And what they told me is when they go to hospitals, it's difficult to get any kind of help, because hospitals are busy tending to those who are dealing with some kind of medical emergency. So if you're an addict and you're not dealing with a medical emergency that's life-threatening, you're usually going to get kind of pushed to the side. It's not the hospital's fault necessarily. They're busy places, especially emergency rooms. They're trying to tend to those who might die. And so an addict who needs help, who's struggling, who's maybe hit rock bottom, as we hear sometimes, isn't getting the kind of help that they need, and they tend to walk away from a medical facility. So the folks at Hope Not Handcuffs thought, where do we go to that we know can be focused on an individual? And they thought of police departments. It has worked in other states, and we're proud to say that it has worked here in the state of Michigan too. What happens is one of our personnel from our desk will contact a volunteer that they call an angel. And there are over 600 angels now in the state of Michigan. These are folks from different backgrounds, and a lot of them that I've met, again, are mothers and fathers who their sons or daughters have maybe even passed away. A lot of them have had sons and daughters who have passed away from drug addiction, especially with our opioid epidemic that we're dealing with now. They come in, they immediately start working with other volunteers. They call them in, and they start working to place a person into an inpatient addiction program. And doesn't matter if you have insurance, doesn't matter if you're wealthy, they place you, they do everything they can to get you into a facility. They arrange transportation. That's not something that we have to do. We're just there to create the space. We just have our front lobby or some other place that they can work with, and the angels will come in. They provide them some food, some snacks, a blanket if they need it, and then they immediately start working to placement. Because they know a lot of times that an addict is usually going to have second thoughts just because of the nature of addiction, and they're going to walk away. So this tends to work very, very quickly. I'm proud to say that since we started this in last year, we've had 5 persons who came forward and asked for help and were placed. And they came from, again, various different kinds of addiction problems. They weren't just opioid addicts or someone struggling with alcohol. They were struggling with alcoholism too. To me, that's significant because, as Chief Niebitz has said, we've had 4 deaths related to the opioid addiction problem, and for 5 people to come forward and at least start to get some help, I think that's a pretty good start. Overall, since they started Hope Not Handcuffs in 2017, they've had 3,300 participants, 3,300 people come forward to ask for help. So again, I think this is something worthwhile. Do these folks always stay in sobriety? Absolutely not. If you talk to somebody who's an addict, they'll tell you it's a struggle. It's a lifetime of struggle, and it may not be the first time, but a lot of times they'll continue through sobriety. So we're dedicated to working with our partners in the community. That's what we do here in Farmington and Farmington Hills. The physiological effect that drugs have, especially the opioid problem, and we'll hear a little bit from my former boss, Craig Summers, you'll hear chiefs say all the time, we can't arrest our way out of the opioid problem. We need a little bit more of a holistic approach that doesn't take away from what we do. We're still out there trying to reduce the supply, arrest the dealers, and yes, people who are in possession of drugs don't get out of jail free card by saying, hope not handcuffs. That doesn't work that way. But once you're going through the process, a lot of times we do get people who, if they were arrested with drugs, we can start them into the Hope Not Handcuffs process and at least get them some help that they could work on with someone else. So that's all I have. Again, this is in line with our commitment to working with the community. I'm proud to be a member of the coalition here this morning, and thank you. And I think you'll find what Mr. Summers says is very informative.
Thank you, Dan. Our main speaker is Craig Summers. Craig is the Executive Director of the Michigan High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. Craig has had that job since January of 2018 after serving as Deputy Director from June of 2009. He is a former Farmington Hills Police Assistant Chief. He started the department in 1982. He served as a patrol officer, field training officer, detective, undercover officer with the Oakland County Narcotics Enforcement Team, a team leader with NET, it's patrol sergeant, and patrol lieutenant. He was promoted to commander in charge of patrol division in January 2001, and assistant chief in charge of investigations in 2004. He served as a member of the chief's executive staff until he retired in January of 2009, and served as assistant chief of both the Administration Bureau and the Investigation Bureau. He has a bachelor's degree from Wayne State and a master's degree from Central Michigan University. He is a graduate of the 2013 session of the FBI National Academy and the 132 session of the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Commanders. Please welcome Craig Summers, and welcome back, Craig, to Farmington Hills.
Thanks, Mitch. Pleasure. Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be back home. Very, very lucky to be here. Wouldn't be where I'm at now if it wasn't for Farmington Hills. So, I'm going to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do, where I'm at now, And then what I'm really going to talk to you about is the drug threat in the state of Michigan. It's very important that everybody in this room, everybody in this community understand how aggressive and how serious the drug threat and the drug trafficking organizations, the problem that they cause in the state. So HIDA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. It's a coalition of federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies from a specific geographic area, that being Michigan, joined together to receive federal grant funds to facilitate special drug control issues. I'm a program of the federal government. My boss is the federal drug czar. I work through the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the executive office of the president. So I am the director of the Michigan HIDAs. There are 32 HIDAs throughout the country. And as I said, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the federal drug czar, is the boss. Basically, it administers two major grant programs, HIDA, my program, and Drug-Free Communities, which I'm sure a lot of the people in the office in the room here know about and participate in. Our mission, one big mission, to disrupt and dismantle drug trafficking and money laundering organizations throughout the state, throughout the country. We work up at this level. I run a top secret intel center in Southfield right now. We provide federal funding to DEA, state, FBI, local task forces to attack the drug threat in the state of Michigan. So we are trying to get to the top of the organizations, the top of the food chain in those areas to reduce the drug trafficking problem in our state. So basically, what we do is bring together federal, state, local partners, public health, coordinate and synchronize the efforts, make sure we're working on the same page to defeat the drug trafficking organizations. So we're federally funded. The money comes from Washington, Office of National Drug Control Policy, but it's locally controlled. Myself as the executive director, and our executive board basically controls how we spend our money, what threats we address in the state of Michigan. In a little bit, what I really want to talk to you about is what the threats are in the state of Michigan. So this is what the HIDA program looks like throughout the country. There's 32 directors throughout the country like me. Michigan has 12 designated counties that we actually could put money into. Those are the areas where the drug trafficking threat, not the drug abuse threat or the drug use threat, but the drug trafficking threat is the greatest. Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Washtenaw, Kent, Muskegon, St. Clair. Those are some of the counties that we actually focus our work in, because that's where the drug trafficking organizations have set up shop in the state of Michigan. So those are the 12 counties we designate. There's where we work. As you can see, a lot of it's focused around the highways of the state. As you might guess, the drug trafficking organizations use our highways. We are kind of centrally located, unfortunately, between Chicago, which is a major drug trafficking area, New York City, and now what's becoming a major drug trafficking area. Used to be Atlanta, but now it's the Cleveland, Akron, Columbus area where the drug trafficking organizations have set up major shops, and of course the city of Detroit. So here's the thing, the information that I want you to know about that you probably don't get to hear about. But my team, my organization, and just the law enforcement departments and teams that work with us have identified 224 drug trafficking organizations that are currently operating in the state of Michigan. Some of them are as small as 5, 6, 7 people, neighborhood gangs, usually in the urban areas, all the way up to cartels and cells of cartels that take us all the way back to Sinaloa, Mexico, and the major drug trafficking cartels that are supplying the heroin, the fentanyl, the cocaine, the methamphetamine to our country. So of the 224 DTOs we investigated in 2018, 52% trafficked heroin, 45% trafficked cocaine, 39% trafficked marijuana, 18% prescription drugs, 8% crack cocaine, 6% methamphetamine, 5% fentanyl. kind of gives you a picture of what the drug trafficking organizations are doing in our state. Just our teams. Now, this isn't Farmington Hills Police, this isn't Detroit, this isn't MSP, these are just the 32 teams that work under our program. We see 72 kilograms of heroin last year, 158 pounds in 2018. 17 kilograms of fentanyl, 37 pounds. Now, if you think about fentanyl, 2 milligrams is a lethal dose for an average-sized male. That kind of gives you an idea of how much fentanyl we seized. 436 kilos of crack or cocaine, 312 kilos of prescription drugs, 51 kilograms of methamphetamine or ice, and 9,883 kilograms of marijuana. And that's illicit marijuana. That's stuff, that we took that with the legalization of medical marijuana that's been here for about 10 years now, and that's illegal stuff above and beyond all the other marijuana that's allowed in the state because of our current laws. It kind of gives you a picture of our drug trafficking seizures over the last couple of years. And the sad picture is, if you look at it, the numbers are going up. And if we're seizing more, what that really tells us is the drug trafficking organizations are dumping more into our area. And if you look at cocaine, meth, ice, heroin, fentanyl, they're all up. They're all going to be up this year. Overdose deaths from Oakland County, 2008 to 2017. Gives you just a quick picture of what it looks like. Overdose deaths, traffic deaths, homicides. The big gray bar number are overdose deaths. Surpassed gun violence, surpassed traffic accident deaths. It surpassed all other deaths. And that's Oakland County. Here's how we determine the drug threats in the state of Michigan. Every year, my team, as part of our program, has to do a drug threat assessment for the state of Michigan. And then we dedicate and commit our resources based on the drug threat. So analysts from my team, the MSP, the DEA, the FBI, HSI, ICE, other departments get together and do an analysis of the drug threat in the state of Michigan. What the drug threat is for heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, other drugs, who's bringing it in, how much is bringing it in, how much are we seizing, what's happening. So we analyze drug use data, new users, past drug users. We analyze drug overdose data, number of overdoses, location where overdoses occurred, what drugs caused the overdoses. We analyze the type of drug seized, the location where they're seized. Over the past 8 years, and here's the thing that people have to realize and all of our folks need to know. Fentanyl's horrible. Heroin's horrible. Prescription drugs are horrible. But methamphetamine and cocaine are coming back, and the drug trafficking organizations are flooding our areas with those drugs. Remember this. The drug trafficking organizations have no rules. They're businesses. Their number one goal, their only goal, is to make money. It's all they care about, and they don't care about human life. So they have no rules, no regulations. All they want to do is make money, and they don't care one bit about anybody's life. And they're after our children. That's who they go after. You think about it. Big tobacco, big marijuana, drug trafficking organizations. You get people, young people, starting to use their product. They become dependent. They have substance use disorder, and they are customers till death, more times than not. That's what they're looking for. So think about this. Over the past 8 years, there's been nearly a tenfold increase in the amount of methamphetamine seized by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, from 8,900 pounds in 2010 to 82,000 pounds in 2018. That's just what we're seizing. So you got to think about what's coming in. So we like to talk, and I really don't like to talk about it, but you need to hear it. The triple threat: opioids, cocaine, and methamphetamine. and we cannot take our eye off the ball because it's coming, it's here. So the opioid epidemic, heroin, fentanyl, prescription drugs. We have cocaine resurgence now, methamphetamine's on the rise. The number of new heroin and RX opioid users continues to rise at very high levels, even as the quantities of prescribed RX opioids begin to decline. We're doing a good job of getting on top of pill mills and overprescribing, and doctors that have been taught more, and their education level is more. So we've really got on top of that problem, but we still have all the after effects of all those people with substance use disorder that are addicted to opioids that are now looking for a different drug. Our heroin and RX opioid deaths continue to rise. The heroin supplies continue to increase. RX opioid supplies are beginning to decrease. So the amount of prescription drugs available out there are less because we're doing a better job of that, educating, monitoring, things like this. But think about this, the drug cartels are pressing fentanyl and heroin and those types of substance with pill presses, make them look like Vicodin and hydrocodone and hydromorphone. So when people are buying these pills on the street, they think they're buying a prescription drug that they're used to buying or using from a doctor or a pharmacy, but they no longer can have those because of their substance use disorder. Now they're buying these pills on the street. They think they're buying a Vicodin, and actually they're getting a pill that might have 5 milligrams of fentanyl in it, and it's disaster. According to the CDC, approximately 50% of the increase in heroin-related deaths after 23 can be attributable to increases in deaths involving both heroin and fentanyl, and it's higher than that. It's fentanyl that's out there now more than anything. Mexican drug trafficking organizations are now dominating the fentanyl and heroin market in the United States, as they have in the past with cocaine and methamphetamine. Understand, fentanyl basically started coming from China. It's made in a lab. It's easy to make. It's cheap to make. Heroin, got to grow poppies, right? Got to grow a field of poppies, dry the poppies, process the poppies, transport the heroin. Fentanyl, create in the lab, 100 times more potent than heroin, right? So you could make a kilo of fentanyl, 1,000 grams, what is that, 200,000 fatal doses for about 1,000th of the price it costs to make that much heroin. So think about what the drug trafficking organizations and the cartels are going to do. They've learned how to make fentanyl. They don't need to get it from China anymore, so they're making it in Mexico and shipping it up here in amounts that are hard to understand. Fatal overdoses regarding fentanyl and fentanyl analogs have increased by staggering numbers. The mixing of fentanyl with other opioid drugs has significantly increased overdose deaths. A lot of people are buying things and they're not getting what they think. We have people that are experimenting with cocaine and methamphetamine, and on occasion they'll get their cocaine and get a little bit of fentanyl mixed in it because the drug trafficking organizations, these are chemists working in a lab with a white coat and beakers and measuring the grams. They're dumping the stuff in, mixing it up, and selling it. And quite honestly, people dying is part of the cost of doing business from them. Remember, people with substance use disorder are chasing the very best high they can get. Most people with substance use disorder don't want to die. They don't think they're going to die. They always think that, hey, Mary or Joe did that amount. Mary or Joe didn't know what they were doing. What they don't realize is what these trafficking organizations are putting in the substance now that nobody can survive. Cocaine, once again, is flooding the market. Colombian coca productions more than tripled between 2012 and 2016. The reason being, some people are shying away from the opioids and heroin and stuff with all the death and things like that. So what do? There's a demand for cocaine, so here it comes. Cocaine and methamphetamine seized by HIDTA drug units nationwide exceeded that of opioids to include heroin. The supply and demand for stimulants, both illicit cocaine and methamphetamine, and illicit RX stimulants are rising at a more rapid rate than opioids and have become an emerging drug threat for the nation. So that's one of the messages I want you to have, to know that it's coming, it's here in this community, and methamphetamine and cocaine are going to be just as serious as heroin and fentanyl. People might not die as quickly, but it's still going to take them down the path. Drug trafficking of illicit stimulants, cocaine and methamphetamine, RX stimulants have both increased over the past 7 years. Even though methamphetamine production via local meth labs, we used to have a meth lab problem in the state, on the west side of the state, where we produced our own one-pot cooking labs. You know, you get a couple of chemicals, pseudoephedrine, a couple of chemicals, you mix it in a Coke bottle. If it doesn't blow up or burn or kill you, you get about 2 grams of produced meth. We don't need to do that anymore because the cartels are shipping in multi-pounds of meth. They're giving it away, making it available to our folks, our kids, to get people hooked. Mexican DTOs dominate the cocaine and meth markets in the United States and currently dominate the fentanyl and heroin markets as well. Overdose deaths involving cocaine and methamphetamine are rising rapidly. The rise in cocaine also is interactive with opioid epidemic. Fatal overdoses involving opioids and cocaine increased 63% from 2012 to 2016. Today's cocaine is now increasingly cut with multiple highly toxic adulterants. Used to be in my day when I was on the drug team, the drug trafficking organizations and the people selling dope cut their cocaine, mainly that's what we were buying in my day, with sugar products, mannitol or inositol. So basically, if they had an ounce of Coke, they'd mix it with an ounce of cut, so they had 2 ounces of product to sell and kind of double their money. Now, they're mixing this stuff with whatever they can get that's cheap. Anti-worming medicines, prescription medicines that are sold in Africa and other countries to prevent people from getting worms, blood thinner medicines. And what's happening is folks are going into the hospital with serious illnesses, not from the cocaine itself, but from the adulterants in the cocaine or methamphetamine that these drug trafficking organizations are mixing in. I mean, if you think there's quality control when you buy a gram of cocaine or a gram of meth, there is not. You could be getting rat poisoning in there. I mean, and medical professionals are having a hard time doing is diagnosing people because they don't know where these symptoms are coming from. People are bleeding out, severe, causing heart problems, kidney, liver disease, cancer, and ultimately death, not from the cocaine or methamphetamine itself, but from the adulterants they're putting in the drugs. Drug dealers lacing their products with fentanyl. So, college kid goes out, buys a gram of cocaine, is going to snort a little cocaine over the weekend, thinks all is good. Nope. Because you know what? There's 2 milligrams of fentanyl in that cocaine. And they thought they were just going to have a nice little weekend party, and they end up either overdosed or death. They don't understand what hit them. They're mixing a very, very strong depressant with a stimulant because they don't care. Fentanyl has become a driving force behind the opioid crisis. DEA reports that throughout 2018, street-level drugs laced with fentanyl have flooded our market. In many instances, users are aware that the drug they're taking contains fentanyl. So we have fentanyl-laced heroin, fentanyl, this is from the labs, fentanyl-laced cocaine, fentanyl-laced methamphetamine, fentanyl-laced fake prescription drugs, carfentanil-laced heroin, heroin-laced cocaine, heroin laced with fentanyl, carfentanil, and U-47,700. It's called gray death. Drug overdose data. Unfortunately, Michigan, we are statistically higher than the U.S. rate for overdose deaths. This comes from the Center for Disease Control. If you look at some of the numbers there, it kind of gives you an idea of overdose deaths from the Center for Disease Control, the different, and the synthetics is the big yellow line, the straight ticket up. This is from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, overdose deaths. So you can see kind of heroin's going down, but opioids, and basically they're the synthetics, the deaths are going up. 2018 numbers are going to be higher. It's the opioid epidemic by the numbers. It's an epidemic. Governor's declared it an epidemic. The president has declared it an epidemic. 130 plus people die every day from opioid-related overdose. Most of you know these numbers. They're sad. 3 waves in the opioid rise. So we started off with prescription drugs, right? Then it was heroin, and now it's synthetics, and it's mainly fentanyl. And there's like 17 different analogs of fentanyl. The Chinese, you know, our government is trying to work with the Chinese government to get them to stop shipping this stuff over here. It's not working very well. Most of the businesses in China are owned or operated by the government, and they are making fentanyl in the labs over there and shipping it over here. You can ship an ounce of fentanyl in the mail, send it UPS, send it FedEx. That's what's happening. Fentanyl-related deaths from 1,663 in 2011 to 18,335 in 2016 and to 28,466 in 2017. This is from the Center for Disease Control. That's fentanyl. So think about this. This is from the CDC. If you're a young person and you're addicted to alcohol, you're 2 times more likely to become addicted to heroin. If you're addicted to marijuana, you're 3 times more likely. If you're addicted to cocaine, 15 times more likely. And if you're addicted to RX opioid painkillers, 40 times more likely to become addicted to heroin. And you probably can switch heroin out and make that fentanyl, or end up getting exposed to fentanyl. Here's what's going on with cocaine. Don't want you to forget about it, but people are now having overdoses with cocaine mixed with an opioid. Methamphetamine overdose deaths. According to the CDC, the number of fatal overdose deaths involving methamphetamine more than tripled between 2011 and 2016. Less than 5% to nearly 11% during the same time period. Meth seizures at the border tripled between 2012 and 2018. 10,333 drug overdose deaths involving meth in 2017. Just some graphs to give you a picture of what it looks like. Now let's talk about some of the good news. You folks are the good news. This is why we're making a difference in our communities. Public safety, public health, working together to save lives. Should have happened years and years ago. I can't believe people didn't think about it earlier, that public health and public safety. You think about, you know, on the law enforcement side, a lot of the issues we deal with are public health issues. You know, substance use disorder, gun violence, you know, domestic violence, all things that law enforcement are dealing with on the streets are public health issues, you know. So a couple of things that we're doing now in the HIDA program. We have something that's called an overdose response strategy. So it's basically 11 HIDAs. We're working with the Center for Disease Control, 24 states, and basically the mission is kind of like Hope's Not Handcuffs. It's not about the law enforcement issue. It's really about saving lives, reducing overdose deaths, and saving lives. So we develop and share information about heroin and other opioids across agencies, offering evidence-based intervention and strategies. We work with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. This is what it looks like, the states that are involved. As somebody mentioned earlier, you know, the opioid overdose epidemic started really on the East Coast. Ohio, unfortunately, Michigan, we're like in the top 10 for overdose deaths. Not where we want to be. So basically, the ORS goal is create and coordinate data sharing that allows public health, law enforcement, and others to respond quickly and effectively to overdose incidents and trends. Unfortunately, for years gone past, the data we've had is, it doesn't help me or anybody in this room, public health, public safety, law enforcement, to know what happened in Michigan in 2016. What I need to know is what's happening today, this afternoon, in Farmington Hills, in Detroit, regarding fatal and non-fatal overdoses. To give me statistics that are 2 years old, there's nothing we can do about it. Getting real-time data that we can share with public health and public safety. On the public safety side, for us to identify those traffickers and get the fentanyl off the street. You know, you take 2 ounces of fentanyl off the street, you're going to save some lives. For the public health side, to know where overdoses are happening in real time so we can get the prevention and treatment folks out there to intervene, get the message out, and help some people and save some lives. So that's what we're trying to do. So, ODMAP. It's a program we have. It's real-time reporting of fatal and non-fatal overdoses. We get information. Chief Nevis and Chief Unruh in the City of Farmington Hills Police Department are in ODMAP. Basically, we track in real time fatal and non-fatal overdoses so that for the police department benefit, where they know to put investigative resources to get the drugs off the street. For public health and public safety, is to save lives. It's a program that the HIDA created. We are pushing it out throughout the country, and it's available to law enforcement and public health people that need to have the information. It's a very simple app, works on your phone. Basically, first responders put in there a geocode for a location, not an address. We're not identifying houses, just gives us a general area, whether it was a fatal or non-fatal overdose, when naloxone, whether naloxone was administered or not, how many doses. The reason we ask for how many doses, we generally know that if somebody, it took 3 or 4 doses to reverse somebody, more likely than not, it was a fentanyl overdose. So we track that information, we provide it to our law enforcement partners in real time and our public health partners, and we hope to save some lives. This is what it looks like in Maryland. So those are overdose, fatal, non-overdose, or fatal and non-fatal overdoses from July 1st to December 31st of 2018. They get this information in real time. The whole state of Maryland is up on the program. So law enforcement, both public health and public safety, can respond and intervene in an appropriate time to save a few lives. This is what we're pushing in the state of Michigan. We're also working with the University of Michigan Injury Center. Dr. Cunningham, Amanda Kagowski is our public health analyst. I am a public health analyst, Amanda, working in my shop to help us share information with public health to save lives. So we collect data from the medical examiner, emergency departments, and first responders to identify fatal and non-fatal overdoses. And we track that data and we share it with everybody so that we can hopefully save a few lives. Hope that gives you an idea of how bad the drug threat is. Here's what you need to know. You need to stay vigilant. We need to keep sharing information, working together. It's not going to go away. The drug trafficking organizations are not going to go away. If there's a penny to be made, they're going to be here. I didn't talk much about marijuana, but I'm going to. Don't think the drug trafficking organizations have gone away just because marijuana is legal. They have their fingers way up into the grow sites and the marijuana that we're growing. The THC levels of the marijuana. Somebody talked about Colorado a little earlier. Back in our day, in my day when marijuana was around, THC content about 3%. THC content from plants and buds they're picking and growing now is over 36% THC content. There's been no studies done on that. Nobody knows what THC at 36% does to anybody. Now, if you cook it, you know, if you use a BHO, you grind up all the plant matter, the stalks, the stems, you remove the THC out of it, the wax, the dab, the shatter, 97 to 100% THC. When you see kids vaping, don't just assume they're using the Juul and they've got some flavored, colored, nicotine stuff in there. Kids are vaping THC, pure THC. Everybody talks about the law and it now being regulated in the state of Michigan, and we're going to regulate it so well with law enforcement. Think about how we've regulated alcohol. Think about how we've regulated tobacco. Does anybody think we're really going to be on top of THC and marijuana? Do we really think it's not going to get into our kids' hands? Do we really think the drug trafficking organizations that they can make a buck aren't going to sell these products to our kids? They are. They're going to be there. It's going to be big money. And here's what I say about marijuana. Let science be our guide. Let's not listen to the propaganda and all the tax money we're going to make, because nobody knows on the other side, there's a lot of money collected in cigarette tax, but the money collected in cigarette tax is about 1/10 of 1% what it's costing us in medical expenses for all the people that have smoked cigarettes. So let science be our guide. Let the research be done. And if there is things in CBD oils and stuff that help patients, like the drug that has been approved by the FDA and they're using for seizures in children, that's great. But let's not let big marijuana, like big tobacco, decide what we're going to do. Think about this. All the drugs that you know about, Tums, aspirin, any kind of a drug you're thinking about, what drug did you ever get to vote for and say, yep, I vote that this should be a medicine? Did you get to vote on Tums? Did you vote on aspirin? Did you vote on antibiotic? Did you vote on Pepto-Bismol or Alka-Seltzer? No. But 10 years ago, we voted the people that marijuana is a medicine. How does something like that happen? You got to think about that. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Craig, for that excellent presentation. And now I'd like to invite up Becky Dorkin to lead us in the pledge.
Okay, if you'll just stand. Okay, raise your right hand. Okay, the pledge is on the papers on the table for those of you that haven't been here before. Okay. I, as a member of the Farmington Hills community, do solemnly swear to do my part and commit to break the silence surrounding the pain and chaos caused by the underage or illegal alcohol and other drug use, abuse, or addiction and domestic violence. I acknowledge that my commitment will support community members in need of intervention and support, which will ultimately save lives. Further, I acknowledge that my commitment today, on October 4th, 2019, will assist to maintain safety and security and well-being of all who reside in the Farmington Hills community. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. I want to thank the entire staff here at the Caustic Center and the Gourmet Express for putting on the breakfast for us. I want to thank all our presenters. They did an excellent job. And I want to thank the schools for coming out and supporting this program. And I especially want to thank Becky Dorkin, who is the legs behind this program. So have a great weekend.